Hello, heroes, and welcome to week 4 of the Zero to Hero Digital Entrepreneurship Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt M., also known as Matthew Cole Inc. You can find my stuff below. And here is our other host,
MTDestroyer. Hopefully you know me if you're on my channel.
One would hope. This week's episode, we are going to cover starting where you are, mostly because it takes the least amount of effort. So it's definitely the lazy man's way to get to a project. One of my favorite quotes, and I think I've probably already said this in a podcast.
Maybe.
Is the Bill Gates quote that says, if I want something done, and I'm paraphrasing here, if I want something done, I'm going to give it to a lazy person because they're going to find the easiest way to do it. So starting where you are is really about not overcomplicating or not getting ahead of yourself as you begin this journey.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. And what I'm wondering, though, is when you say starting where you are, do you mean that as far as your skill, as far as your knowledge level, as far as your emotions? What do you mean by starting where you are?
I think it's all those things. So I think the first thing you're going to do if you're like, I am going to go and become the next millionaire on the internet, or I'm going to go and save insert cause here on the internet. The first thing you need to do is take a few minutes, take stock of where you are in all of those respects. Because resources are definitely things like how much money is in your bank account, how much time do you have in a day, because time is absolutely a resource, and we will absolutely be doing a podcast on that.
Now, why do I feel like I have less than 24 hours in a day?
Because time is relative.
Oh, okay.
We can
answer.
also do a podcast on that.
Good answer.
They're probably more qualified than us for relativity of time. Yeah. But what I would say is, so those things are definitely resources, and maybe they're the more obvious ones. But I think you're right. I think knowledge is a resource. Yeah. I think your emotional stability is a resource.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely take stock of all those things.
So then, knowing where you are, I guess that involves mentally as well. But for example, and tell me if I'm on point here or not, would be how much stress you can handle. So if you're going to be taking out more than you can chew, right? Biting off more than you could chew. Like as in, I started my network, Conquer the Network. I just started off by making like 5 sites.
Yeah.
And without any content for them, I just made 5 sites. And
yeah.
There's no way I could possibly develop them, make the content for them,
sure.
and do all that. And I'm wondering if knowing, your personal stress tolerance and what you're capable of achieving, does that factor in knowing where you are?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And you're not going to know all these things right at the beginning. So I think part of the journey from zero to hero is a certain degree of self-awareness. So, at the beginning, you're probably going to overestimate yourself in some ways and underestimate yourself in other ways. So you're probably going to overestimate your ability to handle stress, the number of things you can get done in those what feels like less than 24 hours, and maybe you're going to underestimate your ability to learn new things.
Yeah.
So part of it's definitely going to be finding that, okay, well, here's the amount of stress I can take. And the better you are at really aiming for that, I think the less you're going to get burnt out, and the less you're going to leave on the table. So you're not going to have moments where you're like, I have just sprinted for 2 weeks and now I'm done.
Yeah.
And now I just don't want to even look at this website anymore because I thought it was going to be a millionaire by now and it's been a month. But you're also not going to have those moments where you're slowing yourself down and taking months to do things that should only take a week.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a balance aspect to it.
So then let me ask you this. So when you say knowing where you are, the way it's phrased makes me feel that you should know your limits. You should be aware of what you don't know. Like you know what I mean? You should know what you don't know.
Well, I think this podcast, honestly, I think our intention is definitely to help people know what they don't know. But there's
are you dissuading? I want to make sure that we're being clear that it's okay if you don't know things. Know where you start, sure, but you can look to the future. You can look to these things that you don't know, and you just identified things you need to learn. That's all. It's not that, just because you don't have any coding experience, you don't have any website building experience, doesn't mean that you can't start by building a website.
Yeah, but it actually does, because
Do you think?
Yeah, because what we're doing is we're skipping a step, and I think the reason that this particular episode is so important is most people skip this step, which is to take a step. I'm not going to say step too many times, but it's to take a moment to remove yourself from what you're about to do and actually recognize that you don't have any coding skill, or recognize that coding skill is a thing you might need, or recognize that you actually have an uncle who's been writing a blog for 12 years, and those sort of things are resources that you need to take a second, a moment, a few minutes of your time to recognize, and that's all about identifying your resources. So starting where you are is about identifying the resources that you have available to you. It's about recognizing the skills you have. It's recognizing where you need to go. It's not saying that you're not looking towards the future. It's saying that I think the tendency when you're doing a project like this is to look only towards the future. And I'm saying take 10 minutes to look towards the present. Take 10 minutes to be like, where am I right now?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to decide how you're going to get somewhere, or how long it's going to take you, or the amount of effort that's going to need to go into it to get to that point if you don't know where you're starting from.
Yeah.
So I think that start where you are is more about, recognize your limitations. Don't limit yourself, but recognize that there are limitations.
Yeah.
Recognize that if you don't know coding and you want to build a website from scratch, you are going to need to build in several months at the very least to teach yourselves the basics of coding.
Okay.
And it's definitely not to discourage people, but it's also to give people a reality check. Because I think if you jump into this process, and I'm sure you've had this too, where you've had a project, you've gotten a couple weeks in, you have all these big dreams for it, and it crashes on you, I think it's worse to do that to yourself than it is to be like a little more tempered in the beginning. And I think it's a hard thing to learn, and maybe one of the things you learn as you go on in your podcasting journey.
Okay, so you're not saying, yeah. I just wanted to clarify when you were saying look to the present and identify these resources that you have and what you need and stuff. I was more saying, if you're gonna build a website, you shouldn't really be scared by the fact you don't know it. The best way to learn it is just to go full force ahead and do it. But what you're saying is you should really take stock in the fact that there are tutorials available. Maybe you have a cousin that's a website developer, and it might be easier than you trying to learn it yourself, just to get him to teach you or help you with it. Is that sort of what you're going for as far as my point was concerned?
Yeah, and I think people are going to start at different points. So not everyone is going to know nothing about coding.
Yeah.
Some people will know some things. Some people will know nothing. Some people will know a lot. Maybe you're someone and you're coming out of a 10-year career as a website designer and developer, and coding is not a problem for you.
Yeah.
But you have no idea how to do any kind of branding work. All you've really done is the coding for the past 10 years. So, I think taking stock of where you are is just it's a reality check, and it's a great way to know, it's a great way to tease out the differences between those areas of competency you have and those areas of competency you don't. And once again, I don't want to talk just about knowledge. I think that's reductive. If you have a full-time job and you're approaching this, then know that you're going to have less time than someone who is in college and has more time on their hands. If you have a family, you're probably going to have less time than if you don't.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that time aspect. If you have a bunch of money in the bank, and we'll talk a little bit later in this episode about some ways to raise some very small amounts of quick cash, and how long you can sort of sustain yourself on those, at least in terms of the business or the entrepreneurship aspect. But I think that's the takeaway, I would say, from that initial point.
Yeah. So then, would you suggest that people have an initial minimum before they get started? Is there any requirements to getting started in this sort of stuff with entrepreneuring, in your opinion? As far as money is concerned, as far as time, or is it, what you make of it? Or what's your opinion on this?
So I think one of the great parts is if you take this moment and you identify those resources and you learn to start where you are, you're going to be more realistic about things like that.
Yeah.
But I think the other half of the equation is, and I agree with you here, I think this is definitely what you're driving at, is don't wait for the perfect moment, because there is no perfect moment. You are never going to all of a sudden find yourself with oh my God, look, I now have 40 extra free hours a week and $10,000 fell into my lap, and I just met 4 people who have the exact skill sets I need. That moment is not coming, and I promise you, if you tell yourself that a little bit isn't good enough, then you'll never get started.
Yeah.
And even if all you're going to do is do 5 hours a week, over the 1 hour, Monday through Friday, you're going to get home, and before you turn on the TV, before you eat dinner, you're going to do 1 hour of writing for your website.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah.
So there's never going to be a perfect moment, and it's always going to be messy, and you're always going to be doing these things in the middle of your life. Because until you really reach a point where this is your life, it is going to be interjecting itself in the little in-between spaces. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you felt that.
Messing with your sleep schedule and whatnot. Yeah. So then it almost sounds like this, knowing where you are is kind of closely related to setting realistic goals for your venture or for your plan. Does that make sense to you?
Right. And I think, so for me, it's always been, I try and figure out, where I am, in the metaphorical sense. Then I try and get a sense of, all right, what's not perfect about the moment.
Okay.
So maybe I don't have a lot of time, but I do have a lot of money. That has never been the case.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we share that?
I would very much like that to be the case. But if you're in that situation where you're like, oh wow, I am busy to the gills, but I have the money to fund a website. Then you're probably going to hire someone to develop your website, and you're going to hire writers to write for your website and bring your vision to life. And you're still going to put a lot of effort in, but so I think that's the benefit is you're not going to tax yourself in areas that you don't have.
Yeah.
If you don't have a lot of money but you have a lot of time, which may be some of our listeners, then you're going to have to just work your ass off.
Yeah.
If you have neither, then you're where we are, and you're going to really have to work your ass off, and you're going to eat a lot of cereal as well. So, I think that those are my first 2 things to get off here is start where you are, and don't wait for a perfect moment.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think do you have anything to add to that before we sort of hop, skip, and jump?
Go ahead, you're good.
So I think I'm going to, before we go into raising some quick cash and a few other resources to maybe keep your eye on, I just wanted to share a quick story from when I was in college.
Go ahead.
I had this idea when I was in college. I was a freshman in college. I had just moved down to the dorms at the University of Alabama. I am from New Jersey. Alabama and New Jersey are a significant distance from each other, both geographically and temporally. In the fact that Alabama at moments is anywhere between 30 to 100 years behind. And sometimes, let me tell you, I had a great time at the University of Alabama. Don't get me wrong, but it was definitely a bit of a culture shock. And about 2 months in down there.
Okay.
And I discover this site called Vistaprint.
Okay.
Vistaprint. And I want to start a business. And I'm fooling around on Vistaprint making business cards. And I have this really cool design for a card. And then I'm thinking about my business. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to put together Meckley Enterprises. And it's going to be great. And then I spent 5 hours, I kid you not, going over so I took Latin in high school.
Okay.
I was looking up Latin phrases for how do I want to word my motto and all this kind of stuff. And I must have spent what I can only describe as somewhere in the range of 12 to 16 hours making these business cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a business to back it up?
Oh, well, we'll get to that in a second.
Sorry.
I bought the business cards.
Okay, yeah.
So
sure.
I spent more money than I'm willing to admit shamefully here.
Okay.
I bought business cards. I got the business cards. They looked awesome. They really looked awesome. I still have all of them because I didn't have a business. I had a really nice business card, but I had no business.
Yeah.
And I think it was a great example of being 18 and not taking stock of where I was.
That's hilarious.
You know, and lots of passion. The business cards were really great. If anyone wants one, there are still like probably 497 of the 500 that I bought are probably sitting in a box somewhere. But yeah, so I think that's what I mean if I'm going to illustrate it.
Okay, I see what you mean. So what I guess an easy way to phrase it then would be, don't get caught up too much in the excitement where, you have this new idea, you have all this adrenaline and excitement coming through you, and you think that like you're on to something big, you have this grand new plan or idea or whatever. It happens to me a lot. And then, well, I mean, I guess one scenario would be you get burnt out. The other scenario would be you get ahead of yourself, like you were saying, and you just go overboard. You I don't want to say overcompensate because I don't think that's even close to the right word here, but you
overshoot your mark.
You overshoot, yeah.
Yeah, you do, and that's definitely true, and it's a shame, and it happens, but that's why I wish I had done this step, because if you're 18, the first thing that you need to recognize is that you don't know shit. And if you're 40, the first thing you need to recognize is you know marginally more shit.
Marginally, okay.
But yeah, there's always that, like, there's always a learning curve. There's always things to learn. And there's always resources that you're going to miss. So the positive portion of this, I think, is that if you really look for resources, they are probably around you.
Okay.
So that can range from anything from the scholarship fund that no one applies to grant proposals, to that's just money kind of things. But maybe you can free up 5 extra hours a week by cutting your commute in half, or maybe you add a little time to your commute, but you commute by train. And it saves you, $4 a week, and you can work on the train.
Oh.
So
I think I misjudged what you meant about resources then at first. What you're saying now is kind of giving me that moment where I'm like, oh, that's what he meant. Because by resources, you mean the simple things that we kind of just take for granted almost, like time.
Sure.
Time is a resource. And you had said that, but I didn't really get what you meant by it, by the fact that, well, time is a resource, sure, but you can get more of it. You can identify that you need time, so you can take the train to get some extra time.
Exactly.
That's what you meant by it.
Exactly. Okay. And if you have a lot of personal connections, use them.
Yeah.
If you have a relative that knows a lot about something, talk to them. It's all about identifying resources, because once you have a decent stock of what you do and don't have, you have unwittingly already given yourself a to-do list. You've already given yourself a direction. Because if you're like, I don't have any time, and I don't have any money, but I do have a lot of friends that know a lot about SEO, and we'll talk about search engine optimization at another time, another podcast. But
or 5 podcasts.
All of a sudden, you're like, okay, so I need money and time.
Yeah.
So now you have your first sort of things. Like, I need to free up some time. I need to free up some money.
Yeah.
Or I need to get a part-time job to pay for my job. Which, welcome to entrepreneurship. I think it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That hit a little too close to home. I was like, oh, I gotta.
You, I'm sure, have a story about that.
Well, no, but I mean, it's just I sometimes I think back at how much money I've sunk into just my different ideas, between just hosting my websites every month, and just stuff from SoundCloud stuff to plugins and themes that I'm buying for WordPress, to software that I'm buying to look at keyword research and stuff. It's like, I spent a lot of money on this. But I guess it's all about being smart with the things that you do purchase. So I make sure to only purchase things that will be useful for a long time, because I know that monetary constraints are a big problem for me. So I will only purchase things if I know it's $20 and it comes with lifetime updates. Sure. So I know, yes, I'm spending $40, but it comes with lifetime updates. Sure, if I know that it's forever, I can steadily accrue or just accrue is a good word, these softwares or otherwise, and then 6 years down the line now I have probably close to $500 worth of like SEO based software that I can now put together an entire campaign of, and I'll talk about it later, but the point being, for me, it paid off to think of the long game. I realized that by buying a software that allowed me to create 301 redirects, wasn't doing me much when I bought it.
Sure.
But then
Definitely.
3 months later, when I also bought the software that did X, I could combine them and then I could make something out of it.
Right.
So.
Because software is a resource.
Yeah.
Knowledge is a resource. So
Yeah.
you learned how to do things on the software.
Yeah.
That's something you know now.
Yeah.
And that's something you bring to the table every time you go to a new project.
Yeah.
And that's why there's no substitute for experience. That's part of what that is. And, even think about it. Like, if I know we had a media lab at the University of Alabama.
Okay.
That had top of the line Macs and the best of the best software in the industry.
Okay.
For music editing, just anything you can imagine. If you wanted to make a film, they had a sound studio, you could record something. I mean,
that's cool.
That was an awesome resource that as a student I had access to. So those are like some things where you might not think of them as resources, but once you've identified them, you can go, well, wait a minute. There's a sound studio. I can reserve it. I can use it for free. I don't need to buy a microphone.
It's true. Yeah. I mean,
and now if you're low on money, you've just identified a resource and you've worked around a problem that you might not have even recognized you had.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. That makes sense to me. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's my take. And to me, major resources, when you're starting out, money, time, knowledge, and relationships.
Okay.
There's some other things that we might call stuff, like things like software. But I think to me the big four are those four, because those are the four things that really drive everything else.
Yeah.
You can use money to get a lot of the other things that you need to run your business. And knowledge, relationships, and time they're harder to quantify, but they're valuable. And they're the sort of things I think that can drive your business forward.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so the other part of this, and this is sort of the final step, so you're going to start where you are. You're going to identify the resources you do and don't have. You're not going to wait for a perfect moment, because such a moment does not exist. And then finally, when you've decided to act and you are acting from a place where you are knowledgeable about what you do and don't have, you're going to want to raise some extra cash, find some extra time, maybe build a knowledge base, maybe seek out and develop those relationships that we talked about.
Okay.
And there's going to be a couple different ways you can go about doing those things. I know we mentioned briefly taking the train. I recommend that if you want to build your knowledge base, you can subscribe to Zero to Hero podcast and listen to it on your commute. But do you have any maybe suggestions for our fearless heroes, and how they can maybe expand on some of those resources?
I guess what it comes down to is, after you have identified what you don't know, because that's kind of what you had discussed for the first couple of minutes of this episode. The internet is your friend, so Google's your friend. I always tell that to people, and I know it seems so
true.
It seems like common sense, but you would be surprised by how many people don't realize that if you don't know something, just Google it and read tutorials. Everything that I learned by Google. By Googling how to do it, and then I just read like 45 different articles online. You have to know what you get good at quickly is how to search Google.
Sure.
You can't just type in anything and get what you want. You kind of have to target your searches to make sure you get what you want. But I mean, really, I guess that's what I would say as far as knowledge-based things are concerned. If you want to learn something, just look up tutorials on Google. They have it for basically everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put I was thinking of relationships, and I think one of the books that I found helpful, and I am hardly unique in this respect, but was sort of Dale Carnegie's seminal classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is just a great book. There are 1,000 offshoots of it. I recommend the original. We'll put a link below.
Okay.
But it's just a great way to think about putting yourself in another person's shoes, and in a very genuine way. And this is one of the reasons I like this book more than many of the offshoots and programs that exist out there. Is it's not about getting one over on people. And I know we have mentioned before that we are doing a series on internet ethics in the future. We were talking about it earlier tonight.
Yeah. That'll be a good one.
But that's definitely something where, where it's not about getting one over on people, but it's recognizing common goals, shared interests, and building those relationships. I think money is both a complicated and an easy one. A part-time job is great if you have a little bit of time. If you have a good family or friend base, asking people for a small amount of money can be great. Either you can make it a loan, or you can make a really small amount of money and just call it a gift.
Yeah. Just call it a gift.
And I think one of the things we talked about was identifying small ways to make big changes.
Can I say something to the? Are you on a roll, or can I say something with respect to money?
You can always say something.
Okay. So actually, something I would maybe venture to recommend would be maybe instead of even starting your project or your entrepreneurial venture, maybe first, just after you identify the things that you're going to need to know and learn, see if you can monetize them at all. Yeah. So, for example,
very true.
This is what I was thinking is, if you can learn how to use Photoshop as far as graphic design goes, and then maybe video editing, so Premiere Pro or something like Sony Vegas or something like that. There's no reason why you can't start an account on something like Fiverr, and I'm just saying this as an example because I've done it, and then make some extra money that way. It's not costing you anything, and you can do it from home. This is just an example of something you could do, but why not learn the skills you need to do your venture if the reason why you're getting the money anyway is to fund this venture, and at the same time get paid for it. To me, that's a win-win.
Definitely, and that's part of knowing where you are and identifying your resources.
Yeah.
Once you've learned a skill, it's a skill.
Yeah.
Once you can do Photoshop, once you can build someone a logo,
yeah,
people will have need of that.
Yeah.
So you start to use the things that you've learned already to pay for the next step and the next step. And, and I think that's what I was driving at, which is that real change is incremental.
Yeah.
You don't wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're great at something. It takes little incremental changes. So maybe it's just getting 8 or 9 extra minutes a day because you cut out one thing that you used to do that was silly. I'm trying to think of something. Does
that actually work? I've always heard people say that. Like if you cut out like a couple of little things that you do, you gain 30 minutes every day. But when it comes down to it, wouldn't I just kind of extend my other things to last 30 minutes, or am I really going to save any time that way?
So yeah, I think it's definitely a discipline thing, and I am guilty of this. It's great to say like, I'm going to take those 15 minutes that I spend staring out the window, and I'm instead going to do something with them, and then you spend them watching television. I mean, that can be for better or worse. I would say sometimes it's easier to substitute than change.
Okay.
So maybe instead of saying, I'm going to not watch TV ever again, maybe it's easier to say something along the lines of, I'm going to watch my hour of TV tonight, but I'm going to watch Shark Tank. Or I'm going to watch, this documentary.
A documentary.
And think about it. I mean, you're giving some of your time to listen to this podcast, and your time is a resource.
Yeah. And I guess they're learning something. So
sure. I mean, we work pretty hard, I think, to create valuable content that's worth your time. But even moments like that, there is downtime in your day. There's money that disappears during your day. I know Starbucks is not going to like me for this, and I am guilty of buying Starbucks more than I should. But if you spend $4 on coffee a day,
okay,
that's $80 a month.
That's a lot of money.
If we're just talking about weekdays,
Yeah. It's the little things; they just add up.
Sure.
Because it doesn't. Because $4 doesn't seem like a lot when it's like, oh yeah. I mean, it does. It kind of does. But it's at the same time, it's just $4. But every
Sure.
day, I just had that same exact thought when I realized that I used to when I was still in my undergrad. I used to buy my lunch from the lunch trucks.
Sure.
I used to spend $5 every day, and I was like, it's just $5 every day. It's not a big deal. Then you do the math, and that's $100 a month. So. It's, I mean, because, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. But, and you know what? You want to learn the value of a Starbucks coffee? Go to Fiverr. Look at all of the things that you can get for $5.
Yeah.
And then think about, like maybe don't give up the coffee altogether, but maybe on Fridays you don't get coffee and you go and pay someone to make an article for you for your blog instead.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing where all incremental changes. Don't try and do too much at once, and that's part of that self-awareness.
Yeah.
But, look for ways that you can expand the resources that are a little scarce in your life.
That being said, this is just a really quick aside. If you do pay someone to write an article for you, make sure you proofread it before you go ahead and post that.
Yes. Experience. Definitely an experience.
Yeah, that's experience right there. That's funny. No, I think this was pretty valuable as far as resources go. This podcast episode itself, I learned a lot that I kind of wish I knew back when I was starting. It's just the whole idea of being able to take yourself and understand what you don't know. I think you're right. That's something that a lot of people just skip. They just don't do it. So if you don't take a second to think about what you don't know, you're going to get caught in an endless loop of always finding new stuff that you have to learn.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that sets you apart. Being self-aware is one of the things that sets you apart from the other 200,000 people listening to this podcast. No,
wow.
From at least.
Wow, we have a lot of viewers.
Yeah, and that was
200,000.
That was chump change.
Oh, okay. Last one we had 4 million.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just me listening to this 4 million times.
You joke, but there's bots. But go ahead, continue.
No, I think it's definitely one of the things that sets you apart is self-awareness. And self-awareness is knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, where you stand, exactly where you are.
Yeah.
I've said it 7,000 times in this episode.
Well, that's just an important point.
And I'm going to say it 7,000 more because being self-aware is one of the things that will keep you going. Because I think the number one thing that is going to get rid of future entrepreneurs, particularly in the digital world, is self-selecting out.
What does that mean?
So my best example of self-selecting out is when I was on a study abroad for political science in Brussels, Belgium. And we went to the U.S. consulate, the U.S. ambassador to the EU, the European Union, and one of the ambassador's staff came and talked to us and talked about applying for positions with the State Department. And they said that one of the troubling trends that they had noticed during this period, or during the recent last 5 years, was that a lot of people who were decent candidates for State Department positions were self-selecting out. And what I mean by that is the best candidates, the people who were just definitely going to get the job, those people applied. And then the people that were kind of like, I probably won't get it, but I'll throw out an application anyway, those people applied. Okay. But a lot of the people in the middle thought, I probably won't get this job, so I'm not going to apply.
Oh, so they're not even trying? Well, wait. Oh, do people, you think people would do that as far as entrepreneurs? Just see all the work that goes into it or all the skills you need and then say, like, I could never do this, and then just...
I think that's 100% what it is. I think people self-select out.
That's interesting.
So I think self-awareness is a great way to avoid self-selecting out. And I guess that's the issue. We've got to the end and then we sort of loop back around to the start. But I think the thing you're trying to avoid when I say burning out is really self-selecting out. Because the person that's going to stop you from being an entrepreneur probably isn't anyone but yourself.
Yeah.
it's going to be your willpower, your
Yeah.
drive at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's both the scary part about being an entrepreneur and the really exciting part.
You're the master of your own fate, right?
You
Is that the
are.
saying? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's things beyond your control, but whether or not you keep going is
Yeah.
almost always
Yeah.
in your lap.
And that might even be the most important factor of it. You know, if you
Sure.
you can overcome almost anything else. If you don't have money, you can overcome that. If you don't
Sure.
have relationships, networking based relationships, you can overcome that. You know, all those
Sure.
things you can get around. It's just your motivation and willpower is the one thing you can't fabricate or manufacture. It needs to be there.
Sure, and there's certain things that are outside of your control. So, being someone that maybe Steve Jobs honestly just had a level of brilliance, or maybe Steve Wozniak had a level of brilliance.
Nice.
If you want to read that, I'm going to put the book about Steve Wozniak. I forget the name of it, but I will put it in the links on the bottom as well. Great book. But maybe they were just natural geniuses, maybe, and maybe some people are like that. But you really can't control your natural, innate genius ability.
Yeah.
What you can control is how much you push through.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who have become very successful entrepreneurs that didn't have money, time,
Yeah.
knowledge, relationships
Yeah.
when they start.
It's just the desire to succeed.
Yeah. Those things are obtainable.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're easy, but they're obtainable.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I guess with that, we've reached the end of episode 4.
That is my spiel. I have talked at you enough for this week.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you will be very, very, very much yearning for more of me talking at you next week.
Oh, next week. Yeah, there's
Yes.
always a next week. Sure.
Those 4 million viewers of ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's 4. Oh, it is 4 million. I'm sorry.
4
It was
million.
4 million.
Yeah.
Well, as always, we love to hear your feedback. So drop some comments down below, and give us a like, give us a subscribe, and besides that, I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Always feel free to drop a comment. Saying I like this, I didn't like this. You guys should do an episode on this. We are, despite our 4 million views, we are still pretty responsive. So it was great talking with you, and keep it up, heroes.